Welcome and thank you for joining us. Our guest today is Seth Elliott. Let's get started.
From the front lines of violence prevention, digging into the details that matter. Get ready for a 15-minute fast-paced information download that will prepare you to ask the critical question. When disaster strikes, are we good? Now, here's Jim Bennett.
With expertise spanning more than 20 years in behavioral threat assessment and the leadership, we have Seth Elliott here today, and I'm super excited to have him as part of this show. He is the contributor to the acclaimed book on threat assessment, Assessing Student Threats, a handbook for implementing the Salem-Kaiser system. He's also the author of The Merlin Advantage, Rediscovering the Leader's Greatest Ally. He's already into his second edition on that book, and he's also the founder of Seth Elliott Consulting. Seth, welcome and great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited.
All right. Well, we have plenty to talk about in the world of behavioral threat assessment, but today's focus is going to be on leadership and leading your team and what that looks like. So we're going to kind of focus on that as we go through this.
Yeah.
So let's start with leadership for every level in the prevention of violence. So kind of break it down by level, what leadership looks like.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's an unifying theme. I think that everybody at every level needs to have, and that for me comes down to physical and psychological safety. Those are kind of the yin and yang of things. And, kind of underneath that, a commitment to seeing a part of your leadership role as preserving that stuff we see in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If people aren't familiar with that, you've got your basic needs of food, air, water, and then safety and security is right there at that foundational level. And so each level of leadership, I really feel like has to own that, level appropriate. I think for the CEO, kind of the executive level, it's about the enterprise view, the brand view, but it's still going to be connected to physical and psychological safety, keeping that human flourishing piece. That's a big part of my consultation. Is I even think of myself as like the human flourishing consultant, because it comes down to that. And every leader, from first time front level managers who are really close to the operations, that are happening daily, all the way up to that strategic level, has to have that North Star, I guess, if you will, of human flourishing. That's what we're keeping front and center.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a very important concept. And it's how you motivate your team, how you help them flourish is a big part of that. So let's talk for just a minute because I like to kind of dive into the brand. When I talk about, I've done a class just recently on physical security vulnerability assessments, and I talk about the importance of life safety followed by physical security. But then I tie into that the brand of how it will weather the storm when bad things happen. Let's talk a little bit about kind of the consequences and leadership's role in preserving that brand and in protecting that brand.
I'm glad you focus on that because it's key. The tricky part is it's hard to measure that. Marketing experts understand there's such thing as a brand. They know the psychology behind it, but I think sometimes leaders can forget, that behind the metrics, underneath the metrics that we try to track of whatever it is, a net promoter score or surveys or other data that's coming from how is the external world seeing us as an organization. There's so much, and social media has I think, gotten us closer to understanding this. There's so much in the word of mouth, day-to-day experience between people and the information they share with each other about a particular brand. And so things can change so fast if something happens, if you hit the headlines, where all of a sudden there's a ripple effect, a viral effect, as everybody knows. And that's that brand sense that people have that people have to connect to security and safety issues of like, again, that's that psychological safety piece. Like, how do people feel when our name is said? And yeah, I'd leave it there. I know we're on the fast track on this kind of a program, but yeah, that association between brand, psychological safety, what is it, in a heartbeat?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right on line there with what we want to talk about because, a lot of times when I talk to organizations, I kind of get this response of, well, we're a service organization, we're a government entity, we're a school. I'm not sure really brand plays into this because we're not selling a product. Well, brand to me goes all the way down to any type of organization. When you think of places that have been victimized by the most horrific crimes, violent attacks, they weren't necessarily a business that sold a product. They were a school, they were a government service provider, whatever it is. And that brand of that school name, and I won't say any of them, we can all imagine all the
Sure.
different incidents that have occurred out there, are forever attached to what occurred. I mean, we go back and we look historically at locations where violent attacks have happened and we connect that brand with them. Is that not true?
100% true. And I'm not on here to be a psychologist, but people carry a schema or a symbol or a representation of your organization, whether it's super tiny or super massive. They have that place in their head. And again, they'll make an instant psychological association about how safe they feel when they think of your brand, when they
Yeah.
go to your locations, when they touch your product. Brand's very close to psychological safety, which is also very close to all the physical safety that we often talk about in, many of our conversations and the work we do. So,
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? You could be a psychologist on TV, though. So I'll vote for that. So
okay.
let's talk
I'll
for
do
a
it.
minute about the safety and security leaders and doers in general. So they're constantly moving that needle towards readiness, right? Because, and it's dynamic for sure when we talk about readiness. Leaders have to live in a state of constant readiness for what may go down. What does a healthy leadership approach to that look like?
Well, I think you already said the big one that I would recommend for people. I would just second that first of all and say, you have to think. I really encourage, and when I used to be in leadership roles where safety and security was part of that leadership,
Mhm.
every day was, what if it happens right now?
Yeah.
Like right now. And I think Gavin DeBecker even said at one time, um, all violence happens at the same time, which is now.
Mm.
And I always love that because it's a very Zen approach to like the stuff you prepare for could could manifest itself at any time. And that's the readiness. And even when we're planning strategically, we have to say the security stuff that we're doing, it's a work in progress. And we need to be sort of inspection ready that at any point, like now could be that moment. And so that's what's kind of always behind my thinking and planning and now consultation is like, if today was the day, where are we at? That's a good mindset to have. I think sometimes people feel like that's really heavy, that's kind of paranoid or something. And I talk to people, hey, there's grace in this. It doesn't mean it has to be perfect. I
Yeah.
mean, are we ready to muddle through today? Because any of these situations we talk about, like different things from headlines, it's gonna be pretty messy. But do we have the things in place to sort of muddle through, to get through? And how are we evolving toward better and better all the time? I think that's, again, I use that phrase, it's a work in progress, not to lower the bar, but to just say it's evolution toward a North Star, toward a goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And playing off the show's name, it's always about are we good, right? That question needs to be asked on a daily basis. Would you agree?
I would, and I love that because it's in that Monday morning staffing or huddle. It's in the midweek staff meeting. It's while you're walking somewhere physically in a space. The security leader or a leader that has, some of that function or that responsibility. And again, I kind of think it's every leader. But the question is, hey, are we good right now? How are we good?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean would we like something to happen? Excuse me. It's not that.
Right.
It's if it does, do we have the things in place to take it on, to
Yeah.
start responding?
Yeah, and also from a preparedness standpoint too, right? Or
Mhm.
I guess a prevention standpoint is probably a better terminology to use. Do we have the
Both.
prevention systems in place to hopefully prevent it from happening altogether, much less our response?
Oh, for sure. There's so many things, and I organize it in this little compass fashion. You probably remember this from, previous conversations. The
Mhm.
the north direction on the compass is all the baseline security stuff, policy and procedures, training, SEPTED, all the kind of stuff that operates kind of like antivirus in the background. It's always there, it's always on, and it's always running. And then eastbound is like behavioral threat assessment and management, and westbound is de-escalation skills. And southbound, if you're thinking of a compass in your
Mhm.
mind, is literally if things go south, if there's active violence. And so a leader should be able to kind of organize around that quick compass orientation that's like, have we got those boxes checked? Have we got things in place in each of those areas? Because those are the biggies. If you've got that stuff working, your confidence of are we good, I think can be high.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk for a minute about the general leadership of teams. And I'm going to focus right now because I want to be sure that in every episode, we're giving everyone something that they can walk away with. But I
Sure.
want to be sure that we're reaching out to our behavioral threat assessment teams because that is such an important component of predicting, preventing, responding to violence or the potential of violence in an organization. So let's talk about behavioral threat assessment teams. What does effective leadership of that team look like?
Mm. I don't know if it's $1 million question, but it's a good one. I think quickly, again, because we're kind of keeping the pace up, I would say there's two things. One is subject matter expertise and integrity. Like, and not just the character-based integrity, that's certainly important. But the threat assessment leader, this is not just a general concept of two words that have been put together. And I think sometimes people conflate things a little bit and may not realize the depth of subject matter expertise that really is involved in a true behavioral threat assessment and management program. This is what ATAP, the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, is all about, is this really incredibly important body of work that's
Mhm.
that doesn't have a lot of margin of error for like freestyling and doing your own thing. And I think a leader has to know what those best practices are and keep the team oriented to, are we doing the thing as it's actually supposed to be practiced? So that's one, subject matter expertise. The other thing I'd say that I mentioned at the beginning, within the team, it's this idea of it's only true if it's true. We have to
Mhm.
have psychological safety on a threat assessment team. It can't just be one or two voices kind of, influencing everything. Nobody else wants to say something dumb because there's gurus in the room or whatever.
Mhm.
There's situations like that where somebody's in the chairperson seat for a reason,
Mhm.
but this whole thing is multidisciplinary. It's multi-agency, it's multi-layered, it's multi-perspective. And if we don't have a team where even the new person can be like, hey, I have a crazy question that's probably been asked, but I'd like to bring it up, that should be very warmly welcomed and
Mhm.
supported and validated by maybe people in the room that have much more experience or rank. Oftentimes we say the rank is not really what should be present at this table. Everybody
Yeah.
needs to bring up things. So yeah, subject matter expertise, psychological safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being sure that all voices are heard is so critical because as I've worked with a variety of different teams, I've seen some of the voices be drowned out. And when
Yeah,
you have those sidebar conversations, it's why didn't you say that? That's great stuff. We need that. So let's kind of wrap this up and we're going to do it kind of in two little parts here in the next 30, 40 seconds or so. First of
sure.
all, highest level of concern at the executive leadership level. What should be at the top of your list?
Well, you've already said it in one place. I think brand. I
Yeah.
think just that symbolic presence that the organization has in the customer or client's mind.
Mhm.
What is that? We have to be conscious of that. I think every leader at the strategic level should have just that quick sense of what's true externally, what's true internally. And again,
Mhm.
I talk in my book about organizational cholesterol. That's the internal piece. Not only do we have healthy culture, inside our organization, do we have a behavioral threat assessment and management function? So when cholesterol gets high, when there's grievance, when there's issues, we have something formal to go to that's working in conjunction with the other systems. So again, a systems approach to healthy, happy, flourishing culture. And then that external piece is, how do people see us? And do we have mechanisms in place to detect when people are paying unwanted attention to us, counter surveillance in a variety of ways. And that sounds very spy movie stuff. And maybe some of that, is going on, of course, with security functions and stuff, but also the market surveillance. What's the vibes? What do people think of us?
Great stuff. I hate to do this, but we're on our tight timeline. But here's the good news, folks, that there is more to come. And you can join us on the Good Squad, become a member of the Good Squad in the squad room, where we get the next part of this conversation. And here's the teaser for it. Seth and I are going to dive into the questions that the CEOs, the leaders of the individual teams, should be asking. So if you're sitting there wondering, what do I ask? What is a reasonable question so that I can ensure that we've checked the right boxes? And what should I expect those answers to be? Tune in to the squad, go into the squad room, join the Good Squad. We want to have you part of that, and we'll see you in there. And again, remember, ask the question on a daily basis, are we good? Seth, thank you, and we'll see everyone else in the squad room.
Good to see you, Jim.